He did it, he did. Who did? He did.
Did what?
It to my photos.
Today we're going to be looking at 30 mistakes you're probably making in Adobe Photoshop 2021. Let's get into this.
Have you been telling your friends that you're the Captain Kirk of Adobe Photoshop? You Trekkie nerd! How about we set phasers to kill? Put that claim to the test. Let's see how many of the following misdemeanors you're guilty of. I say, to the brig with you. Number 1. Not using quick keys. Relying too heavily on your mouse and eye? Not a good plan, orangutan. Sounds like too much hard work, as it involves eye-hand coordination. Let your fingers do the work, and try to memorize Photoshop quick keys as you use them. In that way, you can free up more brain bandwidth to think of more important things, like how many Nigels can you fit into a 1959 Morris Mini Minor? Number 2. Using the zoom tool. Using the zoom tool, eh? You just don't mind dropping everything to search that tool palette to find that tiny magnifying glass? You're doing it wrong. Using that method, you'll be slower than a granny sporting ankle weights whilst wading through a swamp filled with non-Newtonian substances. Instead, be a grown-up and use quick keys. Ctrl+ to zoom in and Ctrl- to zoom out. Use Command instead of Control if you're using a Mac. Number 3. Using the scroll bar to move around the canvas. Scroll bars? Are you still using Windows 95 by any chance? If you want to have the appearance of a Photoshop Pro, then start using the spacebar to move around your image canvas. Hold it down, left click and drag. Take your finger off the spacebar and you're back to whatever you were doing in the first place. Unless you were typing, in which case you're going to create a whole bunch of spaces in your text. Number 4. Not understanding DPI. There is no point spending valuable time on an image in Photoshop only later to discover that it is far too small to print, or working hours on a vastly detailed photo to find that it is destined to be a postage stamp. For setting image size for print, go to the menu Image, Image Size and uncheck Resample. Type in the required DPI. For most professional printing, try 288 or 300 DPI, and then you will see whether or not your image is large enough for the task. If it is not, then boo-hoo, this ain't CSI. There is nothing you can do that can add detail where it doesn't already exist. Get a new image. If the image is too large, then no problem. Click on Resample, type in the height and width, including the appropriate DPI, and click on OK. If the image is destined for web or screen usage, then forget DPI altogether and concentrate on pixels only. You will need to check Resample to set the required pixel dimensions. Number 5. Adding feathering to selections before making selections. That is, inputting feathering to your selection from the control bar up here before starting a selection. Not a good idea, Bombardier! If you apply feathering to a selection before you have started it, and then it turns out to be too soft, then you have to start your selection all over again. You won't be able to undo or switch off the feathering. Also, Photoshop will remember this setting for next time, and if you forget to check, it will be applied to all new selections. Do it the right way. Make your selection without adding feathering. Add it afterwards by either going to Select, Modify, Feather, or by clicking on the Select and Mask button on the control bar. Number 6. Cropping out tonal information from levels. Perhaps it's your first time with a histogram in Photoshop. I ain't gonna judge. Have you cut far too liberally into the white and black areas of the tonal range within levels? Oh dear, guesswork, eh? By doing so, you've bleached or burnt out detail in both the lighter and darker areas of your image. And now your photograph looks more like a photocopy from the 1970s. Instead, hold down the Alt key or the Option key if you're using a Mac and drag the black point and the white point until you start to see tiny clumps of pixels. You can also do the same for each channel within your levels. Number 7. Using the eraser tool. Still using the eraser tool to erase pixels on a layer. Erase all knowledge of that tool. If you are erasing pixels with this tool, the only way to bring them back in Photoshop is with Undo or the History palette. Instead, opt for a non-destructive method, Layer Mask. Visit the Layer palette, click on your layer, and then tap on the Add Layer Mask icon. Now, ensuring that the Layer Mask thumb is highlighted, you can use the Brush tool to mask out pixel information. Black to mask out or hide pixels, white to reveal or unmask pixels. As with all non-destructive methods, save your image with Photoshop's native PSD format to preserve your layers and all other non-destructive elements within your image. Number 8. Not using adjustment layers. Whilst we're on the subject, are you still using old destructive methods to perform tasks like levels, curves, color balance, etc.? You know, things have moved on recently in Photoshop. And so should you, Chino Dorino. Use adjustment layers to apply levels, curves, color balance, and other image adjustments. This will afford you the option to go back and alter such adjustments at any point. You can also use masking with adjustment layers, giving you even more control. Consider using the opacity control on your adjustment layer for even finer tweaks. Number 9. Using clone stamp or heal tool on a main layer. Now, there's nothing wrong with using these Photoshop retouching tools, but making changes to any image should be as reversible as possible. When using the clone stamp or heal tool, create a blank layer above the one you wish to work on, and click on the sample drop-down on the control bar, and select current and below. In that way, you can do all of your retouch work non-destructively on a separate layer. No pixels were harmed during the making of this tutorial. Number 10. Not using smart filters. Why do you insist on torturing your images in Photoshop over and over again? Irreversibly applying filters by visiting the filter menu and selecting from the vast library of oddly titled filter types is not something you should be doing. Instead, convert your layers to smart filters by visiting the filter menu and clicking on Convert to Smart Filters. Now, each filter you add will be applied non-destructively, giving you the ability to turn such effects on or off. And you can even use masking. Nice. Number 11. Using silly filters. Photoshop comes packed with more filters than a hamster can cram into its black hole of a mouth. Most Photoshop newbies experiment with filters until they get publicly shamed. Avoid using ugly cliché filters such as anything in the filter gallery. Instead, stick to the tried and tested filters such as Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask, or Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And make sure you use those little fellas non-destructively with smart filters. Number 12. Using PNGs for all web images.
But my web designer told me to use PNGs for all images.
Your web designer is a few coupons short of a free toaster. PNGs equal large file size, something to avoid when publishing to the web. Instead, use JPEGs for all photographic images. Only use PNGs for graphical images with transparent regions, such as logos and icons. If you do need to use PNGs, I would recommend compressing them further by visiting tinypng.com. Number 13. Forgetting to save. Schoolboy error. Computers crash or applications like Photoshop can freeze. Save hours of misery by saving your work every 10 minutes or so with the quick key Ctrl+S or Command+S if you're using a Mac. Number 14. Using Control or Command Backspace to invert masks. There's nothing wrong with inverting a layer mask to swap from visible to hidden. Even Photoshop pros do this when working with adjustment layers. However, Control or Command on a Mac and Backspace will only fill the visible canvas area. If you then later move or expand your canvas, you are left with ugly, unmasked regions. Instead, use Control or Command if you're using a Mac and I to invert your mask. In that way, you can expand your canvas without any issue. Number 15. Using selective color. Are you preserving color in one area of your image and converting the rest to black and white? Fine by me. How about you buy yourself a nice denim suit, get a perm, hang around in laundrettes whilst jiving to Wham! Keep away from the cliches when using Photoshop, please! Number 16. Not spending time examining your images. Are you diving straight in without taking time out and having a good look at your image before you start work? This is how terrible snafus and bungles happen. Unless you want your Uncle Peter to gain an extra arm in that family photo, I suggest you spend a bit of quality time looking at your image before charging in like a teenage Sir Galahad whose mobile has run out of credit. Relax. Number 17. Too much HDR or Unsharp Mask. Have you over-sharpened for that gritty Zack Snyder look? You ought to cut down on the coffee, mate. Again, this is a cliche crime. If you really must depend on using artificial HDR over-sharpening in Photoshop, then take it easy. Use smart filters and turn it down a little with opacity control on the layer palette. And even better, put it all onto a different layer and blend it with a soft light blending mode. Number 18. Using Bevel and Emboss. Back to the sin bucket that is the dodgy Photoshop filters and effects. When are they going to remove those filthy little monsters? If you really want to shout from the rooftops in the public square that you cannot for your reputation as a Photoshop artiste, Then fill your boots, mate, and use Bevel and Emboss effect in layer styles. If you are going to use it, please be supple. Number 19, Over-Whitening Teeth. So, you like to boast to your friends that your teeth are as white as a snowflake in a bag of nuns. Good for you! However, your teeth aren't white, my toothy friend. They're off-white. Teeth often appear yellow in photographs. Instead of turning them brilliant white, add a hue and saturation adjustment layer and reduce the opacity by a small amount and raise the lightness a couple of points. And every tooth fairy in the land will want your autograph, you Photoshop rock star, you. Number 20, using Photoshop to build websites. Yes, you really can do that, but I'm not going to show you how. Photoshop is really good for image editing, not at all good for web design. It's kind of like using a chainsaw to slice up a birthday cake. If you want to build websites, learn WordPress, or even better, visit W3 schools and learn HTML and CSS, and away you go. Number 21, over-softening skin. You've removed all traces of wrinkles, creases, skin texture, and fine hairs. Great! Now your best pal looks as if her address should be Madame Tussauds, Mary Le Bon Road, London, NW1 5LR. In using Photoshop, you should be trying to convince the world that you're not using Photoshop. Instead, by all means go for that plastic look if you must, but keep it all to a single, non-destructive layer. Then bring down the layer opacity until your model starts to look as if he or she has a pulse. Number 22, not using CMYK for print. So, you've sent your brochure packed with images off to the print shop for a glossy 52-pager. Then you get a phone call from Matt at the print shop, informing you that he'll need to convert your images to CMYK and charge you 5 leather pouches of gold for his services rendered. Stop! Before you send your images to Money Mad Matt, make sure you've given each image's color mode the once-over within Photoshop. If your images are RGB, it will say so here in the tab at the top of your image. In which case, convert them over to CMYK by going to Image, Mode, CMYK Color, and resave your images. Matt is going to be so disappointed. 23. Not naming and organizing files. You have 2 terabytes of images because you are a prolific pictophile. But wait a moment. You have never developed the habit of naming your images, and you've been dumping the ruddy lot into a single folder. You messy maniacal microorganism. Do you treat your home that way? Give your image files descriptive names, organize them into appropriate titled folders, and your collection of photos of high voltage overhead pylons will be the toast of Riverside Close. Number 24, not naming and organizing layers. Are you still at it? Keep away from me, ye unclean. As your images start to increase in complexity and the layer stack starts to resemble a caffeine-laced Scooby snack, then start naming your layers in Photoshop. It'll save you time, and it can be helpful in the future when sharing your images with other creative fruity toots. Number 25, not customizing workspaces. You have so many palettes open, you are starting to feel as confused as a chicken at a chess match in Cheshire. Don't clutter Photoshop with floating palettes that you don't use. Close them down and organize the ones that are useful into tabs. If you lose track of a palette that you later decide that you need, then click on the Windows menu and select it again from the drop-down. You can also save your current workspace by going to Windows, Workspaces, New Workspace. Should things go a little south, then go back to Window, Workspaces, and click on Reset. You can also overwrite an existing workspace by giving it the same name as the one you are replacing. Number 26, not configuring quick mask mode correctly. Are you one of those persons who prefer to paint inside out, eh? Artists call this negative shape relations. However, if you are a normal, well-adjusted individual, and such arty nonsensicals will make you want to slap your face so hard, the police will be able to take your fingerprints by inking your forehead. Then when using Quick Mask in Photoshop, be sure to paint a mask with the masking color, as opposed to the inverse. You can change the default by double-clicking on the Quick Mask icon at the bottom of the tool palette and choosing Selected Areas from the options. From now on, you'll be painting with the mask color. Makes more sense. Number 27, using Desaturate for black and white. That's like turning an orange into an apple by painting it green. You strange fruit-harming darksider. For a better, non-destructive result, try using the Channel Mixer adjustment layer. Uncheck monochrome and then adjust the red, green and blue channel sliders until you achieve the desired result. Number 28, bad edge selections. So your selected edges look as rough as a rough thing from Ruffton upon Tees. You've been relying on the magic wand and the magic lasso again, haven't you? Instead, perfect the art of selections in Photoshop with the polygonal lasso, the pen tool, the object selection tool, and refine your cutouts with select and mask, layer mask, and the occasional visit to the layer, matting, color decontaminate, or defringe functions. Number 29, not aligning a crop properly. Ever notice that people tend to squint and tilt their heads when looking at your photographs? Perhaps your images are so sublime that the viewer can't help but escape into the world that you have captured. Or perhaps you forgot to straighten them out correctly and everything's on the tilt. This can be easily resolved by using the straighten tool when cropping your image. Number 30 at last. Removing under eye shadows. Look at your eyes in the mirror. Notice something? You have lines under your eyes. Yes, you really do. Call the doctor, somebody, please. Calm down, Dynamite Darren. This is perfectly normal. Look around you. Other human beings have lines under their eyes also. How about you keep it that way in your photographs and never remove them again?
I do hope you've enjoyed today's little offering. If you have, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like to see more. In the meantime, bye bye.